Hi guys, and welcome back to my ASMR channel. In today's video we have another true crime ASMR case. Now today's case is going to be a long one. I always try and get like the most information that I possibly can on these cases, just so we get like a proper idea of like the victim, the killer, the story, the backgrounds, everything which led to the awful events that happened. A pre-warning, today's case is obviously going to be talking about murder. Obviously it's true crime. So just bear that in mind. If you don't want to watch these type of videos, then you don't have to. You can click away now and join me for another video or another forbidden video if you prefer that over to the true crime. So yeah. Anyway, let's get on into it. So we're going to be talking about murdered on campus, solving the Kristin Smart case. When 19-year-old Kristin Smart vanished without a trace after attending an off-campus party on the night of the 24th of May 1996, everyone wondered where she could be. Some speculated she might have gone on a trip, while others were concerned for her safety, fearing that something more sinister had occurred. As days turned into weeks into months, and months into years, there was still no sign of Kristin Smart. Over time, the dreadful possibility that she had met with a terrible fate became difficult to dismiss. Despite their efforts, law enforcement hit a dead end with their only lead and suspect. They dedicated countless hours over the ensuing decades to conducting interviews and gathering information, hoping to find a breakthrough. However, the case eventually went cold. What had happened to Kristin Smart, and would she ever be found? The truth began to emerge 23 years later, pieced together bit by bit when a podcast star became engrossed in the case and vowed to seek justice for Kristin Smart. Kristin Denise Smart was born on the 20th of February 1977 in Augsburg, Bavaria, West Germany. Her parents, Stan and Denise Smart, were teachers who educated the children of American military personnel in Germany before moving back to the US. She hailed from a loving family, and she was also close with her two younger siblings, Lindsay and Matt. Kristin and her father Stan rather than an explanation. I love that. That just shows that, like, she's quite probably more mature than most and wise beyond her years for her age. She attended Stockton's Lincoln High School, spending one summer in London and another as an exchange student in Venezuela. After graduating high school, Kristin worked as a lifeguard and camp counselor at Camp Makulia in Hawaii. I think I pronounced that right. But yeah, you get a real sense of who Kristin was. The fact that she chose to be a lifeguard because obviously she likes swimming, but the fact that she chose to be a lifeguard and also a counsellor shows that she has a deep care and deep kindness, and she just wants to look after other people. Like, it just shows how much of a loving person she was. She then enrolled at California Polytechnic State University, San Luis Obispo, initially studying architecture before switching to communications. During her time there, she worked as a lifeguard at the university's rec centre. While on campus, she resided at Hall, thriving in her exciting new life and freedom at school. But she always remembered to regularly call her parents to share exciting updates about her life, yet again influencing and like showing that emphasis on how close she is with people, like she checks in with people. Everything was going well until May of 1996, when her parents didn't hear from her. On Saturday, the 25th of May 1996, in San Luis Obispo, California, 19-year-old Kristin Smart, first-year student at California Polytechnic State University, failed to respond to knocks at her dormitory door that morning. No one had heard from her since she attended a party at an off-campus fraternity house that previous night. Her friend Margarita was particularly worried. Kristin always dropped by her room first whenever she came back to the hall, plus she hadn't returned the key she borrowed from Margarita the previous night, and she wasn't replying to texts or calls. Concerned, Margarita, along with some friends, started looking for her around campus and at the party's location, but Kristin was nowhere to be found. So obviously, it's very, very concerning for her loved ones, because she is the type of person who is very active socially. I mean, she would either respond to texts and calls, or she would in person. Like, she was very social, and she had a lot of friends and loved ones, and obviously not hearing from her is very concerning, especially obviously as a friend, as she has her friend's keys and her friend needs some keys, and you know, a friend even says that she comes every morning to her dormitory door. So do you know what I mean? It's weird how she wouldn't, or not even just respond. Worried for her safety, they immediately contacted the university police department to report Kristin missing. Initially, the police dismissed the concern, suggesting Kristin might have taken an unplanned trip and would likely return soon, as it was Memorial Day. Her friends tried not to think the worst or panic at first, guessing maybe she'd gone to see a boyfriend or gone home to visit her parents. However, alarm bells rang when Kristin's roommate Crystal Calvin returned on Monday, the 27th of May, and noticed all of Kristin's personal items, including her wallet, had been left behind. Kristin never went anywhere without them. Obviously, that is such a red flag, because as a person, even if you're not social, you would have your wallet on you. Most super frustrating because then when it comes to solving cases, like, it's more difficult to solve because there's been like a long period of time that's passed. They've not had a head start, and also it is very unlike Kristin to not like get in contact with anyone. She wouldn't just disappear. She's not, do you know what I mean? Like, she loves her university, she loves her friends, she loves her family, she loves what she loves doing, like being a lifeguard. She loves helping people, like she wouldn't just leave without saying anything. Pushed by her concerns, two district attorney's office detectives joined the campus police to intensify the search for Kristin. They spoke to her friends and family, piecing together what happened the night of the party and the following hours. The detectives found the location of the off-campus fraternity house where the party took place, which was only an 11-minute walk away from Moore Hall where Kristin lived, so really not that long. They spoke to some of the people who had attended the party, with some people saying they had seen Kristin throughout the evening and that she had been introducing herself as Roxy, a nickname she often liked to use for herself. They said that as the night went on, they rarely saw her drink, but at the end of the party, they found her lying on the grass outside the house, noticeably intoxicated. Which is very, very weird and concerning, because the fact that she took all night and not drank anything, like she was fine, and then towards the end she was literally like almost blackout drunk outside, is very strange, very strange. Two attendees of the party, Tim Davies and Cheryl Anderson, said that they helped her up and started walking her back to her dorm at Moore Hall. Along the way, another student called Paul Floors, who lived in the same direction, joined them and offered to walk Kristin the rest of the way. When interviewed, Paul Floors, the last person known to have seen Kristin, claimed he walked her towards campus and that they parted ways when they got to a fork in the road. He said he headed towards his dormitory hall and that she continued to her dorm alone. However, his roommate, who had been away that weekend, contradicted this story. His roommate mentioned that while Paul had been done just days after her disappearance. The search efforts extended to Paul's dorm room as well, but unfortunately nothing significant was found. It was the end of semester and summer break, and the room had already been cleaned out. Meanwhile, efforts to locate Kristin Smart intensified as several missing person posters and billboards were displayed in public areas on roadsides, offering rewards for information that could lead to finding her. Additionally, various internet searches and social media pages were created to help in the search. The university also released statements and flyers urging anyone with crucial information about Kristin's whereabouts to contact them or the San Luis Obispo Sheriff's Departments. However, an incident report from the campus authorities unfortunately depicted Kristin in a condescending light, painting her as a party girl who had gone missing, which could have potentially influenced public perception and the urgency of the search. It read, quote unquote, "Smart does not have any close friends at Cal Poly. Smart appeared to be under the influence of alcohol on Friday night. Smart was stalking and socialising with several different males at the party. Smart lives her life in her own way, not conforming to typical teenage behaviour. These observations in no way implying that her behaviour caused her disappearance, but they provide a picture of her conduct on the night of her disappearance." I'm sorry, but saying that the observations are in no way implying her behaviour is caused her disappearance, that is exactly what they've just done. They've literally said that she has no friends. She's just some party girl who is like, she drinks alcohol, she hangs out with men, she doesn't comply with the rules. It basically makes her sound like, you know, a bad kind of person, you know, one that you don't really want to associate with, which is so far from it. She was like the opposite of this. She hardly ever drank, she had loads of close friends, like loads of people loved her there. She, you know, had good, excellent grades, you know, she was not like how they're painting her. I think it's a bit disgusting, because it's like, this is supposed to be helping people search her, not putting them off, and it's a bit bad when it's coming from the campus authorities. Like, this person is in your care and you have a duty of care. She might have not gone missing on site, but she's still one of your students. Like, do you know what I mean? It's like, the FBI also joined the efforts by releasing a post asking for information about her whereabouts and offering a reward of $75,000, as she was considered a high priority missing person. At the time of her disappearance, Kristin was wearing a grey cropped t-shirt and black surfing shorts and red Puma athletic shoes. She had recently dyed her natural blonde hair dark brown and was 6'1" tall. The hope was that her clothing would jog someone's memory, potentially leading to new and valuable information about her whereabouts. Additionally, Terry Black, a man from the Delta area, offered a separate $100,000 reward for anyone who could provide definitive information about Kristin Smart's body or whereabouts. As time passed and no significant leads from the campus police and detectives, the San Luis Obispo County Sheriff's Office took over the investigation in June 1996. They conducted further searches on the campus using cadaver dogs. Intriguingly, 4 cadaver dogs independently signalled the presence of human remains in Paul's dorm room, indicating that they had detected the scent of death associated with Kristin. Hoping this would lead to a breakthrough, the authorities conducted a thorough search. Despite the promising indication from the cadaver dogs, they was room that could definitively link him to Kristin's disappearance. In the fall of 1996, Mary Lassiter, a woman who had rented a house from Paul's mother, Susan Flores, in Arroyo Grande, California, made a potentially significant discovery. And also noting that the scent of her was in a room, maybe she was in his room at one point and he moved her body. Maybe before knowing that the police were onto him, he was like, okay, now I've got to move the body because they're searching and I just want to search my room. She found a single woman's earring in the driveway that reportedly is what resembled one Kristin Smart was wearing in one of her missing person billboard posters. Mary had handed it over to the police, but it was reported missing before it could be officially logged as evidence. As time went on, more information surfaced, but it consistently pointed toward one individual, Paul Flores. Consequently, he became the prime suspect in this case. However, as years passed, this remained a working theory, as no trace of Kristin's body was ever found, making it increasingly difficult to arrest Paul Flores. It might be Flores, or Flores, I don't know. In October of 1996, Paul, along with 7 other witnesses, were to testify before a grand jury regarding the events surrounding Kristin Smart's disappearance. Following his lawyer's advice, Paul invoked his Fifth Amendment rights, answering only basic questions about his name, date of birth, and social security number. His refusal to provide further details led to a deadlocked grand jury. A few months later, in 1997, the Smart family filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Paul, seeking $40 million in damages. They hoped the lawsuit would compel him to reveal information about that night. However, during this deposition, Paul pleaded the Fifth Amendment yet again, 27 times refusing to answer any questions. Paul's parents, Reuben and Susan, were also brought forward, but also gave very little information. This led to the court issuing a stay order on the lawsuit. Speaking of his frustration, the then San Luis Obispo Sheriff Ed Williams said, quote unquote, "We need Paul to tell us what happened to Kristin Smart. The fact of the matter is we have very qualified detectives who've conducted well over 100 interviews, and everything leads to Mr. Flores. There are no other suspects." Between 1996 and 2007, numerous searches were conducted to locate Kristin Smart or her remains, including searches in the backyards of properties owned by the Flores family. Despite these efforts, the case remained open and unsolved, with no critical new information emerging. Meanwhile, the Smart family held up under hope, despite the case being at a standstill. Even though they feared the worst, Stan Smart, Kristin's father, continued to visit the Californian Polytechnic University campus every month until 1998, clinging to the hope that one day he might find his daughter or uncover some clue to her whereabouts. Kristin's mother, Denise, said, quote unquote, "Stan feels like sometimes he just needs to go there to be there. I'm just the opposite. It's too chilling, too hard for me to be there." But I think I understand. But I think it also, yet again, is testament to her dad, because it just shows how close he was with his little girl, and this is his little girl, and the fact that like she's gone and no one knows where she is just horrible. And like years are going by, and do you know what I mean? It's just so destroying, like especially when they can't even put her to rest because there's no body. Like losing someone is already hard enough without Smart family granted interviews to anyone who would speak with them, keeping Kristin's name and story in the public eye. They also reached out to the FBI and state lawmakers, holding on to the hope that one day they would uncover the truth and see justice served. In 2002, a rumour surfaced suggesting that Scott Peterson, who had been convicted of murdering his wife and child and was a student on the same campus at the time of Kristin's disappearance, might have been involved. Scott Peterson denied any involvement and no evidence was found linking him to the case. After 6 years with no sign of her being alive, Kristin Smart was legally declared dead in absentia on the 29th of May 2002. Resigned to the likelihood that Kristin was no longer alive, her family continued to hope that they might at least recover her body. During this time, Paul Flores said that he and his family were continuously hounded and harassed by the public. Paul also struggled to find work, with jobs continually rejecting him. At one point he even tried to enroll with the army to get away, but Kristin's family got to them first and told them about Paul's suspicious past, and that job fell through too. Finally, in 2011, a new sheriff was elected in San Luis Obispo County, replacing the previous lead detective. The new sheriff, Ian Parkinson, expressed a strong interest in Kristin Smart case and committed to the Smart family that he would make it a priority, reigniting their hope. True to his word, Sheriff Parkinson assigned a detective to work full-time on the case. This dedicated effort led to the conducting of 96 interviews, the issuance of 23 search warrants, and the collection of 258 first episode, titled A Face on a Billboard, on the very image that had sparked his interest. He shared the story of the billboard with his listeners and urged anyone with information to come forward as he revisited Kristin's last known movements and delved into the background of the person of interest, Paul. In addition to soliciting tips from his listeners, Chris actively reached out for a variety of sources. He sought out reluctant witnesses who had previously refused to cooperate with the police, encouraging them to speak to investigators. He even approached witnesses who had not even been questioned by the police. Chris also visited Kristin's family, offering them a chance to share their daughter's story through the podcast platform. The response was immediate and overwhelming. On the first day of its release, the episode garnered nearly 75,000 streams, quickly spreading the word and prompting several people to phone in with new information and pressing questions about the case. In the second episode, titled The Only Suspect, Chris Lambert owned in on Paul, the figure at the centre of the Kristin Smart disappearance. He encouraged listeners to provide any crucial information that could either challenge or confirm Paul as a suspect they had been searching for. He detailed how Paul was the last known person to see Kristin and highlighted his suspicious appearance at the police interview, when he turned up with a black eye soon after, pointing out the inconsistencies in his explanations for the injury. As the episode aired, it triggered a significant response. Several listeners emailed allegations that Paul had a history of sexual misconduct. They claimed he'd assaulted intoxicated women, and some had directly accused him of SA. Further, people who had known Paul during high school came forward. They shared memories of him being nicknamed Scary Paul, noting that he wasn't right with girls, as he had displayed weird, inappropriate behaviours in high school. One person said, quote unquote, "You wouldn't want to be alone in a room with him. You wouldn't let any of your friends be drunk around him." Those were kind of unspoken things. As more episodes were released, new witnesses and leads emerged. A former Australian exchange student at the California Polytechnic University at the time who had said he had seen Paul and Kristin struggling near where she was last seen, had also phoned Chris, telling him what he had seen. To encourage people to reveal delicate matters valuable to the case, Chris opened each episode from the 4th to the 8th with a message saying, quote unquote, "The statute of limitations in this case has expired on everything except murder. Anyone who comes forward with information will not be charged with any crime." Mary Lassiter, a former tenant of Susan Floor's home, reached out to Chris Lambert with a chilling story. Mary told Chris that every morning around 4:20 a.m. she was woken by the sound of a beeping reminiscent of a digital watch alarm. This sound seemed to emanate from the backyard, where the concrete had been partially replaced by planter boxes filled with soil. Mary connected these strange noises to the location where she had previously found the earring that matched Kristin's, an earring that had disappeared before it could be officially logged as evidence. She said, quote unquote, "In the master bedroom, I hear this beep beep every night at 4:20 in the morning." Mary Lassiter said that the persistent beeping nearly drove her mad, and that she often searched the backyard hoping to locate the source, but she never found anything. Eventually, a few months later, the beeping stopped. Mary speculated that either the battery of the watch had died, or the watch itself had been removed. It was known that Kristin Smart, who worked as a lifeguard, typically started her shifts at 5 a.m, possibly setting her alarm for 4:20 to prepare. This information struck a chord with many people, Chris Lambert said, quote unquote. "That seems to be the moment in the podcast series that most people have been just completely shaken. This may be the piece of evidence that points to the fact that Kristin was buried in that backyard, or that her belongings were buried in that backyard." The case took another chilling twist when a listener and former colleague of Susan Floor's Paul's mother contacted Chris Lambert. She revealed that the Monday following Kristin's disappearance, Susan Smart Jennifer decided to stay silent about the incident, fearing for her own safety if she went to the police. After 23 years of silence and dead ends in the investigation into Kristin's disappearance, the case finally saw a glimmer of hope. Chris Lambert's podcast, Your Own Backyard, became a major force in renewing public interest and bringing in critical new leads. As it climbed the charts, amassing millions of downloads and listeners, each episode seemed to uncover more promising directions for the investigation, far exceeding Chris's initial expectations. From 2019 to 2023, so only last year, Your Own Backyard continued to play a pivotal role, featuring in-depth interviews with Kristin's friends and family, exploring new leads, and bringing forward witnesses who had previously remained silent. The renewed interest in Kristin Smart case, largely sparked by Chris Lambert's podcast, instilled confidence in the San Luis Obispo County Sheriff's Department that they could solve the mystery of her disappearance, despite not having found her body. In 2019, Sheriff Ian Parkinson officially reopened the case. The Sheriff's Department is particularly appreciative of Chris Lambert's resilience and the pivotal role his efforts played in rekindling public and official interest in the case. They collaborated closely with him, using his connections and the influx of tips from new witnesses and listeners who reached out with information about her case. In 2019, the investigation took a significant step forward when the police secured a court order to intercept and monitor Paul's phone calls and text messages. This decision was based on earlier discoveries that Paul had made a call to his father, Ruben, on the morning of Kristin's disappearance, after which Ruben had already driven to meet him on campus. In January 2020, this ongoing investigation brought some hope to Kristin's family when an FBI agent informed them that there was new information regarding her disappearance. Building on its momentum, in February 2020, the police served search warrants at the residences of the Flores family in San Luis Obispo, Washington and LA. These warrants specifically targeted items of evidence that could potentially link Paul to Kristin Smart's disappearance. Following the discoveries made during a February search, authorities searched another search warrant. In April at Paul's residence in San Pedro, California. The search yielded several critical items, including date, rape, drugs, a wiretap recording of Paul's mother, Susan, advising him to listen to the podcast to stay ahead of the investigation, and several homemade videos of Flores engaging in the assault and rape of young women. The folder on his computer where these videos were stored was labelled Practice. In February 2021, Paul was arrested in Los Angeles under suspicion of firearm possession. The following month, authorities executed another extensive search warrant at the home of Ruben and a Volkswagen vehicle. This search included the use of cadaver dogs and ground-penetrating radar to detect traces of human remains. The forensic examination of soil samples from the backyard of the Flores residence in Arroyo Grande revealed the presence of human blood. Additionally, traces of the clothing Kristin was last seen wearing were found in the soil. With this compelling evidence, the San Luis Obispo County authorities were convinced that they had uncovered the decisive evidence linking Paul and Ruben to Kristin Smart's disappearance and murder. A San Luis Obispo judge issued arrest warrants, and on the 13th of April 2021, Paul, then 44, and his 80-year-old father, Ruben, were arrested and booked into the San Luis Obispo County Jail. Paul was charged with first-degree murder committed during the course of a rape with no bail set, while Ruben was charged with being an accessory after the fact with a bail set at $250,000. The subsequent arrest and collection of Kristin was ready to relax and enjoy the weekend. Around 5:30 p.m, she called her parents to share the good news about her biology exam, leaving them on voicemail hoping to speak with them during their usual Sunday call. She then met up with 3 friends after they left campus around 8:30 p.m. They met another friend who drove them to a truck to an off-campus house for the gathering. After the get-together, Kristin, still eager to stay out, suggested they go to a nearby birthday party at a fraternity house at 135 Great Door away. Her closest friend and dorm neighbour, Margarita Campos, hesitated, feeling tired and needing to use the bathroom. Despite Kristin's pleas, her friends decided not to join her at the party. Reluctantly, they dropped her off 2 blocks from the party venue around 10:30 p.m. Margarita lent Kristin her dorm key since Kristin had forgotten her own. At the party, Kristin introduced herself as Roxy, a nickname she often liked to use for herself. Kristin wasn't a big drinker, so she instead mingled with the crowd and spoke with others. During the party, she encountered Paul, a fellow student who had previously given her uncomfortable vibes. Despite a jarring moment where Paul accidentally fell on her, Kristin didn't think much of it at the time. Later, she was talking to Paul and others. He slipped a date rate drug into her drink without her noticing. After consuming the tainted drink, they went their separate ways. Around 2 a.m, Tim Davis, another student, found Kristin lying unconscious and apparently intoxicated on the lawn outside the house. Though she hadn't drunk much, she was cold and unable to walk. Tim, along with another student called Cheryl Anderson, helped Kristin to her feet and began escorting her back to her dorm. Paul joined them, offering to help, believing he was acting in good faith. Tim and Cheryl allowed him to join, and Tim left the group. As Cheryl and Paul walked Kristin home, Cheryl reached her destination first. She debated whether to stay with Kristin or go home. Paul insisted on taking Kristin the rest of the way, assuring Cheryl that he would safely see her to her dorm. Cheryl left. Paul made an awkward request for a goodnight kiss, which Cheryl refused, settling instead for a handshake. Paul then led Kristin to his dormitory at Santa Lucia Hall, where he attempted to rape her. Despite her intoxicated state, Kristin became increasingly aware and fought back, striking Paul and giving him a black eye. The struggle escalated, and in his anger, Paul killed her. Panicking, he called his father, Ruben, who quickly came to help. Together, they moved Kristin's body to the home. Further discoveries were made during searches at the home of Ruben, Susan, and Paul. Notably, soil samples from the backyard tested positive for human blood, and investigators found decayed traces of the clothing Kristin had been wearing on the night she disappeared. Additionally, the court was told about unsettling behaviour exhibited by Paul before the incident. He had been seen lingering around Kristin Smart's accommodation, making her and her friends uneasy. Stephen Fleming, a friend of Kristin's, testified that Paul's presence made others feel uncomfortable and that he had frequently seen Paul loitering near Kristin's room late at night, despite not living in the same building. Stephen Fleming testified, saying, quote-unquote, everyone in the dorms, they were weirded out by Paul. During the trial, several party attendees and friends of Kristin Smart were called to testify, recounting the information they had originally shared with the police about the interactions between Kristin Smart and Paul. A crucial witness was Jennifer Hudson, who was 17 years back in 1996. She recounted the jury how Paul had disturbingly mentioned that he'd buried Kristin under a skating ramp at his home. Jennifer also shared that this encounter had frightened her so much that she'd felt compelled to purchase a gun for herself for self-defense, fearing that Paul might target her next. She said, quote-unquote, it twisted my belly to see him again, but my fear was extinct, and I was no longer afraid of him. I made the decision that every time I wasn't looking at his attorney, I'd stare at him. On some level, it was vindicating to be able to sit up there and look him in his dead eyes, and for him to have to sit there and listen in silence. following Kristin's disappearance. The prosecutor suggested that Paul had also drugged Kristin's drink with date rape drugs, taking advantage of her incapacitated state. To reinforce this argument, they presented evidence found in Paul's home, including date rape drugs and disturbing videos showing him assaulting several women. They also brought up how Paul appeared with a black eye in his initial police interview shortly after Kristin vanished. He provided multiple inconsistent explanations about how he sustained the injury. Now going on to the defense side. Despite the mounting evidence presented by the prosecution, Paul's defense attorney, Robert Sanka, argued that the case against his client was weak. He pointed out that there were no eyewitnesses to any crime against Kristin Smart and that her body had not been found, implying that the physical evidence was insignificant to conclusively prove Paul's involvement in her disappearance and presumed death. He said, quote unquote, "The actual evidence in the case relating to Kristin Smart's disappearance is no different than it existed in the 1990s. The evidence then and now is based on speculation and not proof of facts." Robert Sanko said that Paul had merely escorted Kristin Stewart as far as his dormitory, after which he claimed Paul went to his own room while Kristin continued on her way to her dorm. Additionally, the defense team introduced a controversial strategy by attempting to link Scott Peterson, who is notorious for the murder of his wife and unborn child, to Kristin Smart's disappearance. Scott Peterson had also been a student on the same campus at the time Kristin had vanished. This claim aimed to divert suspicion away from Paul and introduce doubt about the true perpetrator. However, this line of defense was quickly dismissed by the court due to a lack of substantive evidence connecting Peterson to the case. In his closing arguments, Robert Sanko denied that any rape had occurred, questioning the reliability of the witness testimonies, claimed Paul had a history of drugging and assaulting women. Robert Sanko also criticised the prosecution of forensic evidence, labelling it as junk science and suggesting that it did not hold up under scrutiny. This case was not prosecuted for all these years because there was no evidence. It's sad Kristin Smart disappeared, and she may have gone out on her own, but who knows? After days of deliberation, the jury reached their decision regarding Paul and Ruben. On the 4th of October 2022, they began deliberating Paul's fate, and on the following day they moved on to Ruben. However, the process was slowed down when one of the jurors in Ruben's trial sought guidance from a priest due to the stress of the case, leading to his replacement and a restart of deliberations on the 13th of October 2022. By the 18th of October 2022, the juries had reached their verdicts. Paul was found guilty of first-degree murder in the death of Kristin Smart, while Ruben was acquitted of the charge of being an accessory after the fact. Several months later, on the 23rd of March 2023, the sentencing took place. Prosecutor Chris Rout advocated for the maximum possible sentence for Paul, describing him as a true psychopath who posed a continuous threat to public safety. Kristin Smart's family echoed the statement with the brother Matthew Smart, specifically requesting a sentence of life imprisonment. He said, quote unquote, "Paul chose to take a life, my sister Kristin's life, a beautiful life, and now he must pay." During the sentencing, Paul's attorney Robert Sanka made a motion for a mistrial, which was ultimately rejected by Monterey County Superior Court Judge Jennifer O'Keefe. Judge O'Keefe condemned Paul as a cancer to society and ruled that he must register as a sex offender for life. She also added, quote unquote, "You deserve to spend every day you have left behind bars," noting that Flores had lived free in the community for more than 2 decades, while he had engaged in predatory behaviour against women during his adult life. Ultimately, Paul was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. Following the trial, Ruben maintained that he and his son Paul had nothing to do with Kristin's murder. The Smart family efforts with helping to uncover new leads and maintaining public interest, which they felt were instrumental in finally achieving justice for their daughter. Our sincere thanks goes out to Chris for keeping Kristin's story relevant through his podcast. We owe him our gratitude for informing millions of people that Kristin is still missing and deserves justice. Chris was able to fill in a part of the puzzle along with the dedicated members of the sheriff's office who worked this case over the years and the district attorney's office who successfully prosecuted the case. To honour her memory, Kristin Smart scholarship was set up, which read her biography on the website, saying, quote unquote, "She came into this world with an adventurous spirit that never left her. She believed in her dreams and always seemed to know the right steps needed to reach them. The law mandated that all public schools establish formal agreements with local police departments to ensure prompt reporting of cases involving violence or missing students. This legislation aimed to prevent such delays in the future and improve the safety and security measures on campuses across the state." Kristin's family filed a formal complaint against California Polytechnic University for negligent infliction of emotional distress and wrongful death. Following Paul's conviction, he was transferred to California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation on the 30th of March, and then moved to Pleasant Valley State Prison in August 2023 to begin serving his 25 years to life sentence. Within a matter of weeks of arriving at the prison, Paul was attacked by Jason Budrow, an inmate serving 2 life sentences for the murder of his girlfriend, the prison murder of the 1-in-5 strangler. A few months later, on the 10th of April 2024, Paul was attacked for a second time at Pleasant Valley State Prison, with an inmate stabbing him in the recreational yard. He was hospitalized for a few days but then returned to prison. Kristin Smart's story is so tragic. She was not only a name or a case number, she was a beloved daughter, sister and friend, a young woman full of potential and dreams that were tragically cut short. For more than 25 years, Kristin's family and friends, alongside countless supporters, endured immense pain and suffering. Throughout these years, their relentless pursuit of justice and the unwavering hope of finding Kristin and bringing closure to her story have been a testament to the love and dedication. I'm so glad that they got the answers and justice they deserved. And that is the end of today's case. A lot of information, but I can't believe how long it took for them to actually get to the bottom of it, because like I said, if they hadn't have waited 4 or 5 days, things might have been different. They may have had a lot more chance to, solve this case and get justice for her. And how the campus dealt with it as well is disgusting. How they spoke about her, and I think it's right that the family are suing them, because it's just so disgusting, and to demoralise one of their students like that is just awful. And the Paul family and Paul are also disgusting. I believe that the mum also knew about what was going on. That's why she wasn't talking. I think, they were all in on it, and I just think it's so disgusting how his parents didn't say to him to own up to it. Do you know what I mean? His parents obviously knew he was like this, and the fact that he was always assaulting women continuously just proves how much of a sicko this guy was. His energy was weird, and obviously it was for a right reason. The fact that this guy kept folders and a file on his and labelled it practice. Who the f*** does he think he is? It's disgusting. He really thought he could get away with it, and his father did too. And I'm so glad that it's been